So I'm here to talk about the future of work in Latin America. Latin America is at a crux of an opportunity. It can lean into the future of work or remote work and invest in software development, or continue requiring people to come into the office and allow them to stay stagnant at home, at the office. As we saw in the United States, people are not excited going into the office full time. Companies are realizing, okay, we have to come up with some type of hybrid or fully remote opportunity, especially when the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, everybody had to go home. People in Latin America were lagging behind in this aspect. Because from my experience and my understanding, remote work was not something that was common in LATAM. So what happened was when the pandemic hit, people were rushing to figure out how to work remotely successfully. And so the pandemic hit Latin America hard because people were underprepared to work remotely. When I say underprepared, it's really having a functional workspace, an environment that allows a person to work, and the mindset that is required to be a good worker. The workplace and college environment needs to change as well. The need for developers worldwide is so great that LATAM can start encouraging more people to get into this field. It is one of the easiest ways to provide a great living for yourself and for your family. It's a great way to establish yourself and get yourself out from whatever situation you are, and even potentially give yourself the flexibility to do whatever you want. Also, working remotely, being a software developer, really gives you the comfortability to be wherever you are. And in LATAM, they have one of the best opportunities to be a huge tech hub. For example, when we look at the United States, there's over 1 million vacancies in software development right now. And this demand is increasing every year. With all the boot camps, all the college graduates getting into software development, the demand is still not being met. So what people in the United States are finding that even if they want to hire in the country, they can't. So they're starting to look everywhere else. And Latin America is the prime location because of time zone. Companies in the United States, they would rather hire someone in the United States, but because they can't, if Latin America doesn't prepare themselves ready for this, they have to, the US is looking towards Eastern Europe, India, or other regions. What we saw during the pandemic was companies wanted to go to LATAM. The spike in the last 2 years, you're seeing 200% increases just in certain countries in LATAM in hiring. So the crucial component that ensures LATAM is ready is getting them familiar with getting software developers ready for the next wave of technologies to learn. Blockchain technologies, Web3 technologies, AI, machine learning, and other deep tech technologies are crucial. Blockchain and Web3, for example, is a fairly new field. It didn't really, a language unique to blockchain didn't really become commonplace until about 5 years ago. So if someone breaks into the field now, they're only 5 years behind. And if they take the necessary steps, they're going to be at the forefront. And blockchain is also picking up steam all throughout LATAM. You're seeing certain countries adopting it as their standard of coin, and more companies and countries are searching for those developers, and they are getting paid well. A blockchain developer will get paid easily $10,000 a month. They understand how to build on blockchain because it is important to understand what it means to build on it. Because if you mess it up, you're actually losing money. You can lose something, as opposed to if you're a developer and you mess something up, you might just lose some data. Data on the blockchain means money. However, it's important that the talent is knowledgeable on what it needs to build on it. The reason why companies are often going to Eastern Europe and everywhere else is because these areas have focused primarily on these deep tech technologies. And with the recent events in Russia and Ukraine, companies have come to me saying, we don't want to have a centralized body of developers in Eastern Europe. Where can we go in Latin America? And sadly, oftentimes I have to say, I don't know, or there are certain dev shops that you can go to. I have found significant talent in Argentina that have been good, but it's kind of limited there. You can go to Puerto Rico, of course, because it is a major tech hub for blockchain. But outside of that, it's a struggle. There's not a lot of communities developing in Latin America around blockchain. So I really see that as another opportunity where people can start to get into, um, and start focusing. And I'm seeing more and more conferences popping up all over Latin America. The thirst for knowledge is there. It just needs to get more. It needs to get more well defined and even pick up more energy in the region. Uh, my suggestion to my suggestion on a few major points to focus on is kind of fourfold, right? We got one. I see that we need to create in LATAM, and we need to create a more inclusive learning experience and a workspace that's conducive for all. I say this as the first point because in my time in Latin America, I've tried and I've tried to work with female developers, and I've actually interviewed quite a few to figure out what is their situation, what is their struggles to break into the workplace, and they've told me that they feel uncomfortable, to put it lightly, when they go into school, when they're coming into the workplace. There is this level of uncomfort. Also, they're thought of, um, they're not given the same amount of opportunities. A female developer starting as a male developer will not make the same. Also, when you look at these two interviews, women are being asked, when do they plan to get pregnant? It is perfectly legal in LATAM to ask this type of question. And when they do break into the field, they're oftentimes encouraged to get out of software development and into another field. I know this is an uncomfortable topic, and I'm not the expert on this, but I do know that this is happening and it needs to change. And the fact is, with the drought of software developers, we need to encourage everyone. We need to foster an environment that everyone can become a software developer and break into this field. This diversity in this workplace is vastly needed. And we have to create this environment where everybody can feel comfortable coming to work, feel comfortable knowing that they can do a good job and they can actually provide. And it's up to the fellow workers, it's up to the managers, and it's up to the CEOs and the CTOs and the decision makers to foster this type of environment. And in addition to this, right, not only does diversity and having just the need to have more developers, having a diverse set of developers will actually improve the product and will improve the overall workspace. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think I see I see LATAM burgeoning as a startup and tech friendly environment. I've seen more and more startups popping up. I see more and more investment popping up but I still see lots of software dev and consulting agencies. These software and dev agencies are going to work for other startups, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a really positive thing if they're done properly. And in fact, startup software devs can actually catapult many startups. But we need more developers working at startups, and we need those developers to have this space where, and we need the startups to actually have the infrastructure to succeed. So I've seen some spaces where startups can thrive. Startup Chile does a great job of getting companies in there and catapulting them, but we need to see more. Each region has the ability to have their own startup Chile, or foster this startup environment to catapult more companies to raise investment, because more and more investment is coming into Latin America. So if in Latin America they're able to draw in more money to a vast array of different startups across the spectrum, it can become a leader and an innovator when it comes to what is the next startup, what is the next tech big thing. And it'll actually keep more developers in Latin America as opposed to this exodus to the United States. I know I've talked about the US needing the developers, but if LATAM has this environment, because a lot of software developers do just want to work at cool companies. So LATAM needs to create that. You're seeing some unicorns popping up all over the region, from Rappi to Kushki. And it's going to happen more and more. And throughout LATAM, they need to have that. So as the next wave of entrepreneurs come into the market, as the next wave of investment starts to come in, it needs to have this infrastructure built in so that so startups can do that. Thirdly, encourage remote work environments. Now, not everybody has to have a fully remote work environment. It can be some type of hybrid, or you can go fully remote. But the key is, working remote is not a second-rate job, not now, and nor should it be in the future. Now, we have to foster these type of environments, have the infrastructure set inside our companies to be able to do this. Because if companies are not thinking about a hybrid or a fully remote work situation, they're going to lose out on huge opportunities with developers, with talent in general, because the future of work is going towards this remote model. More people want to work in this remote situation. They're tired of the commute. They want to be with their families more, and it can be a benefit without having to make it a benefit. It can just be that if you have the right tools in place to work remotely, your company's going to thrive even more. So I really see that companies really need to prepare themselves for a remote work situation, because this remote work is going to be crucial in the next stages. People are learning remotely, whether they like it or not. They are going to be doing it, and it's going to be the type of situation where it's going to be a standardized solution. And if we're not preparing now to be there, you're going to be left behind. You're going to lose out on the talent, the best talent that can be to existing for your companies. And next, the reason I bring up some of these topics is they're really important to me. And as I see the future of work, as I see where remote work is taking us, I want to share some more insights I have. So the reason why we have to have more female devs and create a more inclusive environment is because, and here's some facts. An economist from Carnegie Mellon found that teams that include at least one female member had a collectively higher IQ than teams that just had men. When Fortune 500 companies had at least 3 female directors, the return on invested capital jumped over 66%, and return on sales went up 42%, and return on equity increased by 53%. So in general, I'm not just saying female developers it's a more inclusive in work environment as well. Gallup found that companies with more diversity on a staff have a 22% lower turnover rates. And what you find, it's easier to recruit a more diverse staff if you have a more inclusive culture. One thing I've noticed as well is in order to foster this environment for female developers, there have to be female developers, right? You might be asking, how do I hire female developers? I've tried, they're just not there. And that's a fair point. Well, how do we overcome that? Well, there are programs out there that have female developers that are training them. I know of one in Lima called Laboratory where they focus just on building. It's a boot camp for women developers. So also, if you're a company, I know a company like ThoughtWorks takes women and actually trains them to work in their company, and they have a great work culture. I've talked to women out of ThoughtWorks, and they don't want to leave. I've given them, like, I proposed them better opportunities, more money, and they want to stay. So if you can include women into your company, you're going to see that same thing happen. And if you fail to understand the importance of a diverse workforce, an example that you can see is in like games. Over 40% of gamers are women, but less than 10% of programmers. So games are being developed for everyone, but only being made generally by men. So how do you think women are going to enjoy these games if only men are going to play them? And so next I'd want to talk about the startup environment, right? 3 regions that are really exploding are Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico. In 2018 alone, Colombia received over 334 million investments, and now it's increased over 500% from the prior year. So Colombia is doing a lot of things in the local ecosystem to foster the startup. I mean, you saw, if you know, one of the unicorns I mentioned earlier, Rappi, out of Colombia, this environment is going to grow. I think it raised one of the second highest in the last 3 years, next to Brazil. Brazil is very focused on getting this investment. They've received more than 75 billion in foreign investment, and it's the 4th largest destination for foreign investments in the world. And if you look at the aggregate whole of investment, over 11 billion came into investment into LATAM last year in 2021. So many countries are adopting this investment strategy to look towards LATAM. I talked to an investor, a VC fund, looking to raise over 100 million, looking just to invest in LATAM. So we need to have these entrepreneur startup ecosystems for these companies that are looking specifically to invest in LATAM. So I see the future coming more and more towards Latin America. And if you even look towards the United States, Miami has become that bridge to Latin America. And just in 2021, more VCs, more people came to Miami to make these investments. And by creating this good startup environment, the talent follows. Successful startups happen when good talent exists. So the access to talent will grow, and more organizations are going to need to invest and work with these new networks to create successful startups and connections. And finally, when I talk about remote work, when you adopt this remote work environment, it puts less strain on geographical dependencies for employment. You're able to increase the talent pool for employers, for yourselves, because now you're not focusing on your one little region, your one city where people can work, or maybe you have 10 places all over the world, but you can only hire in those 10 places. Well, if you have a remote work culture, you can actually hire outside of that. And if you look at 80% of employers are facing this talent shortage, if you don't think about going remote, that talent shortage is going to be even more present. And as many as 77% of people who work remotely claim that they're even more productive. So not only are you getting more access to more talent, you're getting more productive talent because people are focused more on what they're doing and not distracted by all the chitter chatter that happens or just the other distraction that may happen at the office. And what you see is people want to show that they can actually work remotely. So they want to perform their duties, they want to perform their tasks, they want to do everything correctly. That is why it's really important that as companies, we look towards this providing this remote work environment. And by the way, it doesn't have to just be blockchain or IT sector. You can think of it in any capacity. So what next? There's a lot of information given. Do you hire more female developers? Are you going to go completely remote? Do you need to create an accelerator program to invest in startups? Or think of how to turn your company into some blockchain company? I don't think you need to do all of that. I think if you were to take one thing out of this and do it, it would be to adapt to remote. Because if you adapt to this remote work culture, you're going to prepare yourself for what happens next. Remote work actually will allow you to hire more female developers. You might not find them in your own country or your own city, but that will allow you to find them somewhere else. And if you foster a good, successful remote work environment, you'll be able to include people from all different cultures, all different backgrounds. And you'll be preparing yourself for the future. You'll be preparing yourself to how to communicate across borders. You'll be preparing yourself to get more talent, to have the right communication tools. You're going to need different types of communication tools, from working in office to working remotely. Having the proper project management tools, the meetings, knowing how to conduct meetings is going to be really crucial, because in person you can kind of go off topic, kind of lead it astray, but in remote, it's going to be more important because people are going to tune out. Having the proper types of contracts, being able to sign online, sending out documents, creating connections, fostering an environment where it's not just I come into work and I submit my projects, but also when you're remote, it's important to how to feel those connections out. And you're going to need to prepare to understand how this functions when people aren't in the same location. If your organization isn't remote friendly, you're going to struggle with improving this diversity. So being remote friendly doesn't just fix that, but you can now allow the people to work wherever they want. So you're going to have access to more talent. And as we look towards the future of work and how it will start shaping it out in LATAM, remote is going to be key. That would be my main suggestion of what happens next, is go have this remote mentality. I also do think, and the number two thing I would say is to actually figure out how to invest in a startup ecosystem, how to invest, creating funds that are investing back into LATAM. Don't look towards the investments in the US or Europe or somewhere else, but creating specific funds that are in LATAM, and you can actually get money from the US to invest here, or get money from Europe or Asia or whatever, and use that money to invest in creating your own funds to invest in LATAM. And with those investments, creating the programs to create the infrastructure to launch companies successfully. So many companies fail because they don't have that infrastructure, and having that correct mentorship and creating those right types of connections with other startups and startups, mentors, advisors, and investors. Thank you. My name is Calvin Sedao. I'm the CEO at AWANA, and these are my thoughts on where I think the future of work is heading in LATAM. Thank you.